And so, the great ocean rests, or seems to rest, under the soft light of the moon or the broad, warm gaze of the sun. Its surface might shimmer and dance, ruffled by the passing breeze, or lie flat and calm like a vast sheet of polished glass, reflecting the endless sky. We see this surface, feel its spray, hear its sighs along the shorelines. It feels immense, a single, unified body of water stretching further than our eyes can comprehend. But beneath that seemingly unified surface, hidden from the casual glance, lies a deeper secret, a world of constant, quiet movement. The ocean is not still. It is alive with motion, a slow, deliberate circulation that connects its farthest reaches. Imagine, if you will, rivers flowing within this immense sea. These are not rivers like the ones we know on land, confined by banks of earth and stone, rushing downhill with noisy exuberance. No, these are different kinds of rivers altogether. They are rivers of water flowing through water, vast, slow-moving bodies carving their paths not through rock, but through the subtle differences within the ocean itself. They are immense, wider, and deeper than any river on land, some stretching for thousands upon thousands of miles, carrying more water than all the Earth's terrestrial rivers combined. Yet, they move with an almost imperceptible slowness, a gentle, persistent drift that shapes the character of the entire ocean world. Think of them as hidden pathways, unseen currents wandering through the blue twilight of the deep. Their banks are invisible, defined not by solid ground but by subtle shifts in the water itself. Perhaps one great stream is slightly warmer than the water surrounding it, a legacy of the tropical sun where it began its journey. Its edges might be soft, mingling slightly with the cooler water beside it, yet it maintains its distinct identity, a ribbon of warmth flowing through the cool expanse. It moves not with a rush, but with a deep, settled patience, like a slow, warm breath held within the ocean's lungs. Its passage might take weeks, months, even years to traverse a basin, a timescale utterly different from our hurried lives on land. Another river might be distinguished by its saltiness, carrying water that is denser, heavier, having perhaps surrendered some of its freshness to the sun and wind in a distant sea. This heavier water seeks the depths, sinking slowly, gently, and then beginning a long, meandering journey along the ocean floor, a dense, invisible flow hugging the contours of the underwater landscape. It slides beneath layers of lighter water, a hidden undercurrent moving in profound darkness, guided by the shape of the seabed and the slow turning of the earth itself. Its presence is felt not by sound or sight, but by the gradual shift in the deep ocean's properties, a silent distribution of salt and coolness across vast, abyssal plains. Imagine yourself as a tiny speck of plankton, adrift in this immense watery world. You wouldn't feel buffeted or rushed as you might in a river on land. Instead, you would simply find yourself carried along, part of a slow, collective drift. Days might pass, weeks, and your surroundings would change almost imperceptibly. The water temperature might climb or fall by a mere fraction of a degree over many miles. The subtle chemistry of the water might shift. You would be moving, traveling perhaps hundreds of miles, yet the sensation would be one of profound stillness, held within a vast body of water that is itself in motion. It is like being carried on a slow, silent conveyor belt, part of a grand, unhurried procession. These oceanic rivers connect the world's waters in a way we rarely contemplate. A parcel of water warmed in the sun-drenched tropics might embark on a journey lasting decades or even centuries, carried slowly poleward by one of these great, warm streams. Along the way, it shares its warmth with the cooler waters it passes through, subtly influencing the climate of lands nearby, even lands that never directly touch this particular flow. Eventually, perhaps near the icy realms of the poles, this water, having given up its heat, might grow cold and dense, sinking deep beneath the surface to begin a different kind of journey. A slow return trip through the abyssal depths, a cold river flowing beneath the warmer surface layers. This constant, slow circulation, these rivers within the sea, act like a global heating and cooling system. They transport warmth from the equator towards the poles and carry the chill of the polar regions back towards the tropics. They are the Earth's silent climate engine, working tirelessly, invisibly, balancing temperatures across the planet. Without these hidden rivers, the tropics would be significantly hotter and the higher latitudes considerably colder. The world we know, the climates we experience, are profoundly shaped by this gentle, ceaseless movement hidden beneath the waves. Visualize the sheer scale. Not a narrow channel, but a broad swathe of water, perhaps hundreds of miles wide, moving together. It doesn't churn or foam. Its movement is stately, majestic. It is less like a river, and perhaps more like a vast, slow-moving sheet of slightly different water sliding through its surroundings. The boundaries are soft, blurred, zones of gradual transition rather than sharp edges. Yet, the coherence of the flow is maintained over immense distances, a testament to the powerful, subtle forces at play, differences in temperature, salinity, and the gentle, persistent influence of the Earth's rotation. These currents are ancient pathways. They have flowed for millennia, shaping coastlines through their subtle influence on temperature and sediment, guiding the migrations of marine life, and storing vast amounts of heat and carbon dioxide deep within the ocean's embrace. They are a fundamental part of the Earth system, a slow, rhythmic pulse within the planet's fluid heart. Their pace is geological, their scale planetary. When we stand by the shore and watch the waves break, we are seeing only the most superficial expression of the ocean's energy. The real power, the deep driving force that shapes our world, lies hidden beneath in these slow wandering rivers. They move with the patience of eternity, carrying the memory of distant sunlight and polar chill within their depths. They are the ocean's deep thoughts, its slow breaths, its hidden circulatory system working constantly, silently, to keep our planet in balance. Listening closely, not with our ears, but with our imagination, we can perhaps sense this slow drift. Feel the vastness of the water, not as a static pool, but as a dynamic entity, filled with internal streams and currents. Picture the deep, dark blue, threaded with invisible ribbons of slightly warmer or cooler, saltier or fresher water, all moving in a grand, slow dance. It's a dance choreographed by the sun, the wind, the earth's spin, and the very shape of the ocean basins themselves. A silent ballet performed on a global stage, hidden from our view but essential to our existence. These are the rivers in the sea, the quiet, persistent heartbeat of the deep ocean. They flow on, unseen, unheard, carrying the lifeblood of our planet on their slow, majestic journeys through the endless blue. Now, let us lift our gaze from those deep, slow rivers flowing in the abyss, those profound thoughts of the ocean carried in darkness. Let us rise gently towards the surface, towards that delicate boundary where the water meets the sky. Here, bathed in sunlight or shimmering under the moon, another kind of movement begins, initiated not by the slow pull of density or the chill of polar ice, but by something far more ephemeral, yet immensely powerful in its persistence, the touch of the wind. Imagine, for a moment, the surface of the ocean on a day of perfect calm. It stretches out like an immense sheet of polished blue glass, reflecting the clouds drifting lazily overhead. The deep currents we spoke of are still moving far below, utterly hidden, their ancient rhythms undisturbed. But here, at the very top, there is a stillness, a waiting. The air itself hangs heavy and quiet. Then, feel a change, almost imperceptible at first. A coolness touches your cheek. A faint whisper begins to stir the air. It is the wind, arriving not as a sudden gust, but as a long, slow sigh across the face of the water. Think of a small, quiet pond nestled amongst trees, its surface utterly still, mirroring the leaves in the sky. If you lean down close and blow, ever so gently, across the water, what happens? Your breath, warm and soft, touches the surface. It doesn't crash into it. It strokes it, and the water responds. Tiny wrinkles appear, like threads of finest silk pulled across the surface. These are the very first signs of movement, the water yielding to the air's gentle pressure. Blow a little longer, a little more steadily, and those wrinkles grow into small ripples, miniature waves that begin to travel, carrying the energy of your breath across the pond. They spread outwards, a visible sign of the invisible force you applied. It's a simple transfer of motion, from the moving air of your breath to the still water below. Now, scale this image up, beyond the confines of the small pond, beyond the reach of a single human breath. Picture the vastness of the open ocean, stretching for thousands upon thousands of miles under an endless sky. And imagine the wind, not as a fleeting puff, but as a steady, prevailing force, a trade wind perhaps, blowing consistently in one direction for days, for weeks, even for months on end. This isn't the dramatic howl of a storm, but a persistent, planetary-scale exhalation. It flows over the immense watery expanse like a river of air, constantly moving, constantly touching the sea. This wind, though it may feel gentle on any given patch of water, carries an enormous amount of collective energy due simply to its sheer scale and persistence. As this vast sheet of moving air slides over the ocean's surface, it encounters friction. Just as your hand feels resistance if you slide it across a textured surface, the moving air molecules rub against the water molecules at the very top. It's a subtle interaction, molecule by molecule, multiplied across an area so vast it defies easy imagination. It's less of a push, more of a continuous, gentle drag, like stroking an immense expanse of velvet always in the same direction. The water, seemingly passive, responds to this ceaseless caress. The topmost layer, the very skin of the ocean, begins to yield. Individual water molecules are caught by the friction of the passing air, nudged along, encouraged to move in the same direction as the wind. At first, the movement is tiny, almost immeasurable, but the wind doesn't stop. It keeps blowing, keeps stroking, keeps nudging, and molecule encourages molecule. The slight movement of one tiny particle of water exerts a drag on its neighbor, and that one on the next. Slowly, painstakingly, the wind transfers its momentum, its energy of motion, into the water. It's like teaching a vast, slow partner a new dance step, patiently, persistently. The surface begins to lose its glassy stillness. It takes on a new texture, a subtle grain running across it, aligned with the wind's direction. Tiny wavelets, called capillary waves, appear first, those same wrinkles you saw on the pond, now stretching across miles of open sea. They are the first visible evidence that the wind has gained purchase, that it is successfully gripping the water and pulling it along. These tiny ripples roughen the surface just enough to give the wind a slightly better hold. More friction is generated, allowing the wind to transfer its energy even more effectively. The ripples grow slightly larger, becoming small waves, and all the while, the water itself, the actual substance of the ocean's surface layer, is being set in motion. It begins to drift. This isn't a fast, rushing current yet. Think of it more as a slow, broad slide, a creeping movement of the entire surface layer. Imagine an immense sheet of silk lying on a smooth floor, and you begin to pull one edge very, very gently, but steadily. The whole sheet begins to shift, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but undeniably moving as one. So too does the ocean's surface begin to move under the wind's persistent persuasion. A vast area of water, perhaps only inches or a few feet deep initially, starts to travel sluggishly in the direction the wind dictates. This is the birth of the surface currents, the wind-driven circulation that dominates the upper reaches of the ocean. It begins with this gentle nudge, this patient friction between air and water, played out over enormous scales of space and time. The wind whispers its instructions, and the ocean's surface listens, slowly beginning its journey. It's a far cry from the deep, dense currents driven by temperature and salt far below, but it is no less important. This surface drift is the primary way the atmosphere directly communicates its energy to the ocean, setting in motion the top layer of that grand, planetary circulatory system. Consider the sheer scale required. A breeze blowing across a bay for an afternoon might create ripples and small waves, and perhaps a very slight drift of the topmost water, but it lacks the persistence to establish a true current. But picture the trade winds blowing steadily across the tropical Atlantic, day after day, week after week. Or the roaring 40s, the strong westerly winds circling Antarctica, blowing almost unimpeded over vast stretches of open ocean. Here, the wind's nudge is relentless, the friction is constant. The transfer of energy is continuous. Slowly, inexorably, this constant atmospheric breath pushes the surface water along. It gathers momentum, not through speed, but through sheer volume and persistence. An immense raft of surface water, perhaps stretching for hundreds or thousands of miles, begins a slow journey across the ocean basin, guided by the wind's invisible hand. It might take months or even years for water caught in this drift to cross an entire ocean. Its pace is leisurely compared to the winds above, but compared to the near stillness of the deep ocean, it represents significant movement. This layer of wind-driven water becomes a distinct entity, a river flowing within the ocean, but confined to its sunlit upper reaches. It carries with it the warmth gained from the sun in the tropics, or the coolness absorbed in higher latitudes. It transports floating debris, plankton, and marine life that live near the surface. It is the ocean responding directly to the weather patterns playing out above. So, while the deep ocean currents move with the slow, ponderous rhythm of melting ice and sinking brine, the surface currents dance to a different tune, the tune of the wind. It starts as a whisper, a gentle friction, a ripple on a pond writ large upon the world ocean. But through persistence and scale, this gentle nudge becomes the driving force for the vast, swirling gyres and powerful boundary currents that we observe on the surface. It is the wind's breath, made visible in the slow drift of the sea, the first crucial step in the ocean's grand, silent task of moving heat and energy around our planet. The surface water yields and begins to flow, carrying the wind's energy onward, deeper into the blue. But far below the wind-whipped waves, far beneath the sunlit dance of the surface currents, another story unfolds, a story written not by the fleeting breath of the air, but by the slow, unwavering pull of gravity itself. Here, in the deep, dark cradle of the world, begins a journey of profound stillness, a descent into a quiet that lasts for centuries. The energy carried downwards by the wind-driven surface waters eventually dissipates, becoming a memory of warmth and light in a realm that knows neither. The true journey into the abyss begins differently, not with a push from above, but with a quiet surrender from within. Imagine the polar regions, vast expanses under a low, weak sun, or shrouded in the perpetual twilight of winter. Here, the air is knife-sharp with cold, stealing warmth relentlessly from the ocean surface. The water, already cool from its journey away from the tropics, chills further, its very molecules slowing their energetic dance, huddling closer together. It grows heavy, denser, under the frigid sky, but the cold alone is not enough to begin the great plunge. Something else must happen, a subtle alchemy unique to these frozen seas. As the temperature drops past the freezing point of fresh water, ice begins to form. Not clear, solid ice like a frozen lake, but sea ice, a matrix of pure frozen water crystals trapping pockets of salty brine. Watch closely in the quiet of this process. As the water molecules lock themselves into the rigid lattice of ice, they push away the salt. The ice itself is mostly fresh, a floating white shield reflecting the pale light. But the water left behind, the water that didn't freeze, becomes intensely cold, colder than fresh water could ever be before freezing, and crucially, it becomes saltier. The rejected salt concentrates in the remaining liquid, making it brine-heavy, dense, burdened. This water, now both piercingly cold and laden with salt, is heavier than any of the water surrounding it, heavier even than the slightly warmer, slightly less salty water lying just beneath. It has nowhere to go but down. There is no sudden cascade, no dramatic waterfall into the abyss. Instead, it is a slow, almost imperceptible yielding. Imagine the finest, coldest mist settling, or a thick syrup finding its way through unseen channels. This dense water begins to seep downwards, a languid, heavy drift away from the surface world. It leaves behind the realm of wind and waves, the fleeting patterns of weather, the cry of seabirds, the light of the sun and moon. It slips below the surface layers, past the twilight zone where faint glimmers of light still penetrate, and enters the true deep. The darkness becomes absolute, a blackness untouched by photons for millennia. The pressure begins to mount, steadily, relentlessly. For every 10 meters of descent, the weight of the water above increases by an amount equivalent to the entire atmosphere pressing down at sea level. Here, hundreds, then thousands of meters down. The pressure is immense, crushing, a physical presence that shapes everything within it. Yet the water itself, being almost incompressible, yields only slightly, continuing its slow, inevitable journey. Sound travels differently here. The crashing of surface waves is a distant, forgotten memory. The sounds are few. Perhaps the occasional click or groan of the Earth's crust far below, or the faint, infrequent calls of creatures adapted to this extreme environment. Mostly, there is silence, a profound quiet that permeates the immense volume of water. The sinking water carries this quiet with it, becoming part of the deep ocean's hushed existence. It drifts downwards like a slow, invisible river of cold, hugging the contours of the submerged landscape. It might follow the slope of a continental shelf, a vast, gentle ramp leading away from the landmasses. Or it might find undersea canyons, carved by ancient flows, and channel through them, still moving with that characteristic, ponderous slowness. It pools in the deepest basins, vast abyssal plains stretching flatter than anything on land, kilometers below the surface. But it does not simply stop. Having reached the bottom layers, this dense, cold water begins its true journey, the great, slow circulation around the globe. Driven by the subtle differences in density between water masses, pushed from behind by more newly sunken water arriving from the poles, and pulled along by processes happening oceans away, it embarks on a voyage that can last 1,000 years or more. This is the deep, slow sleep of the ocean current, the thermohaline circulation, the great ocean conveyor belt beginning its hidden work. Think of it as the deep ocean breathing, but on a timescale almost unimaginable to us. The water sinking from the surface in the North Atlantic or around Antarctica carries with it dissolved gases from the atmosphere it was last in contact with, particularly oxygen. This oxygen, trapped within the water as it descends, is a lifeline carried into the abyss. It is this slow supply of oxygen that allows life, strange and sparse as it may be, to exist even in the deepest trenches, far from the sunlit world where oxygen is produced by photosynthesis. The sinking water is a slow, cold exhalation from the surface, providing the breath needed for the deep. The water itself remembers the cold of its polar origins. Down here, the temperature is stable, unchanging, hovering just a few degrees above freezing point, regardless of the season or the weather raging thousands of meters above. It is a realm of perpetual, stable cold. The water flows sluggishly, perhaps only centimeters per second, an imperceptible creep across the muddy floor of the abyss. It is a current measured not in knots, but in centuries. It travels through darkness, past underwater mountain ranges taller than any on land, through vast trenches deeper than mountains are high. It carries the signature of its origin, its specific temperature and salinity, like a fingerprint, allowing scientists tracing its path to know where it came from, whether the icy waters of the Greenland Sea or the frigid edge of the Antarctic ice shelf. This deep water mass moves like a vast, slow entity, filling the bottom of the ocean basins. It is the foundation upon which the rest of the ocean's structure rests. Its immense volume and slow movement give the ocean its thermal inertia, its ability to absorb vast amounts of heat without rapidly changing temperature itself. This deep, slow sleep acts as a planetary memory, holding the conditions of past centuries within its cold embrace. Imagine this water, having sunk near Greenland, beginning a journey southwards along the bottom of the Atlantic. It creeps past the equator, still cold, still dense, still dark. It flows onwards, eventually rounding the tip of Africa or South America, entering the vastness of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Along the way, it might mix incredibly slowly with other deep water masses, gradually changing its characteristics over hundreds of years. It might be forced upwards slightly as it flows over underwater ridges, a process called upwelling, but mostly, it remains confined to the depths. Its journey is one of almost complete isolation from the surface world. The dramas of storms, the seasonal cycles of plankton blooms, the paths of ships, all happen in a different universe far above. Down here, time stretches out. The sediments on the ocean floor accumulate grain by grain, century by century, burying the remains of tiny organisms that lived and died in the waters above, creating a slow, continuous record of Earth's history. The deep current flows over this record, itself a part of that long, slow history. Eventually, after perhaps 500, 1,000, or even 1,500 years of traveling in darkness, this water begins to change. Through incredibly slow mixing with the warmer waters above it, and perhaps aided by geothermal heat seeping from the ocean floor, it gradually warms and becomes less dense. Its long sleep is nearing its end. Somewhere, far from where it sank, perhaps in the Pacific or Indian Ocean, it will slowly begin to rise. It won't rush upwards, but gradually ascend, mixing its way back towards the middle depths, and eventually, perhaps, towards the sunlit surface once more. But that awakening is a story for another time. Here now, the focus is on the beginning. The chilling, the concentration of salt, the surrender to gravity. It is the quiet, heavy sigh of the polar ocean, breathing out a stream of cold, dense water that will nourish the deep and regulate the climate of the entire planet. It is the start of the deep, slow sleep, a journey into darkness and pressure, a silent, hidden river flowing through the largest, least known habitat on Earth. It is the ocean's memory, its patient heart, beating on a time scale of centuries, utterly essential, yet moving with a calm, unhurried pace far removed from the restless energy of the wind-driven surface. The water sinks, heavy and cold, finding its place in the quiet depths, beginning its long, slow pilgrimage through the hidden world below. And so, the water descends, finding its level in the profound quiet of the abyss. But its journey, this pilgrimage into darkness, is not a solitary drift into oblivion. It is, instead, the beginning of a connection, a thread woven into a pattern so vast it encompasses the entire globe. Imagine this slow, sinking stream not just as an ending, but as the start of a planetary embrace, a circulation so immense and slow it feels less like a current and more like the Earth itself breathing, drawing all its oceans together in a deep, enduring hug. This embrace, this slow, connecting flow, doesn't have the restless energy of the wind-whipped waves we see crashing on the shore. It moves with a different kind of rhythm, a cadence measured in centuries. Think of it as a great, silent river, born in the chilling polar seas, but destined to travel the world. From its birthplace, perhaps beneath the icy skies of the North Atlantic, where the water grew heavy and surrendered to the deep, this river begins its southward journey. It flows unseen beneath the familiar currents of the sunlit Atlantic, a hidden counterpart to the Gulf Stream's warmth far above. It slips past the equator, carrying the memory of polar cold into the southern hemisphere, a deep, persistent whisper beneath the waves. It travels for unimaginable distances in the perpetual twilight or utter blackness of the deep ocean floor. Mountains taller than any on land rise from the abyssal plains, and canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon scar the seabed, yet this slow river finds its way. It contours the submerged landscape, a dense, cold presence moving with unwavering patience. It is not a rushing torrent, but a vast, slow creep, perhaps moving only a few miles in an entire year. Yet, over centuries, this seemingly imperceptible movement carries it across ocean basins. As it journeys south, past the tip of Africa, past the vastness of Antarctica where similar processes might add their own cold contributions, the river begins to branch. It doesn't fork sharply, but rather sends out slow, searching tendrils. Some of this deep water, carrying its ancient chill, finds its way eastward, entering the immense basin of the Indian Ocean. It slides beneath warmer layers, a cool foundation supporting the tropical seas above. It continues its slow exploration, mixing ever so gradually with the waters around it, its sharp coldness softening over the immense timescale of its travel. Another branch, perhaps the main flow, continues its journey, pushing onwards into the mightiest ocean of them all, the Pacific. Imagine the scale of this. Water that last saw sunlight near Greenland, perhaps when Vikings sailed those seas, now flowing silently beneath the waters of Polynesia, thousands upon thousands of miles away. Centuries later, it fills the deepest trenches, pools in the vast abyssal plains, a hidden reservoir of ancient, cold water that has traveled further than any surface explorer. It is a testament to the planet's interconnectedness, a physical link between distant poles and equatorial seas, all happening far from human eyes, driven by the simple physics of temperature and salt. But this journey into the deep isn't a one-way trip. The embrace wouldn't be complete if it were only about sinking and flowing away into darkness. For the hug to be whole, there must be a return. And there is. Remember the water we left sinking, heavy and cold? As it travels through the deep basins of the Indian and Pacific Oceans over countless years, subtle changes begin. The faint warmth seeping from the Earth's crust below, the incredibly slow mixing with slightly warmer waters from layers above, these influences gradually lessen its density. It doesn't happen quickly. It's a transformation spread across generations, across centuries. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the water that sank so decisively begins to stir from its deep slumber. It starts to rise, not as a dramatic upwelling, but as a gentle, diffuse ascent, mixing its way upwards through the water column. It leaves the crushing pressure of the abyss behind, carrying with it the nutrients accumulated during its long, dark passage. It rises through the middle depths, becoming part of intermediate currents, still far from the sunlit surface but moving gradually back towards it. And eventually, after a journey that might span 1,000 years or more, this water completes the circle. It rejoins the upper layers of the ocean, often in the vastness of the Pacific or the warmth of the Indian Ocean. Now, closer to the surface, it becomes part of the wind-driven currents once more. Warmed by the tropical sun, it begins a return journey, but this time near the surface. It flows back, perhaps crossing the Indian Ocean, rounding the tip of Africa, and heading northwards through the Atlantic. This surface return is the other half of the embrace, the warm arm of the hug balancing the cold, deep flow. Think of the familiar warmth of the Gulf Stream, carrying heat from the tropics towards northern Europe, making lands habitable that would otherwise be much colder. This surface warmth is, in part, the return journey of water that once sank near the poles. It has completed a planetary circuit, a vast loop connecting all the major oceans, distributing heat and cold, salt and fresh water, nutrients and dissolved gases across the globe. This entire system, this slow, looping dance of sinking, flowing deep, rising, and returning warm at the surface, is what scientists sometimes call the Great Ocean Conveyor Belt, or the meridional overturning circulation. But perhaps Earth's warm hug captures its essence more gently. It's a circulation driven not by wind, but by subtle differences in water density, by temperature and salt, playing out on a timescale that dwarfs human history. It connects the icy waters of the poles with the sun-drenched tropics, the dark abyss with the sunlit surface, the Atlantic with the Pacific and Indian Oceans, binding them all into one single, breathing, circulating whole. It operates with a profound slowness. If you could tag a single drop of water as it sinks in the North Atlantic, its journey back to the surface and then back to its starting point might take a millennium, perhaps longer. Imagine the world changing above, as this water makes its slow passage, empires rising and falling, forests growing and shrinking, ice ages coming and going. Yet, through it all, this slow, deep circulation continues its patient work, a constant, stabilizing presence. It's this hug, this slow exchange between the deep and the surface, the cold and the warm, that plays such a crucial role in regulating our planet's climate. By transporting heat from the equator towards the poles near the surface and carrying the cold back towards the equator in the deep, it acts like a global thermostat, moderating temperatures. Without this slow, steady embrace, the tropics would be significantly hotter and the higher latitudes considerably colder. The world's climate patterns would be drastically different, far more extreme. So, when we think of the ocean, let's remember not just the crashing waves and the sunlit ripples, but also this hidden, slow, and utterly vital circulation beneath. Picture that sinking water near the poles, not just disappearing, but embarking on an epic, centuries-long journey. Visualize it flowing as a deep, cold river through the dark, connecting distant seas. Imagine it slowly warming, rising, and returning near the surface, carrying warmth like a comforting embrace around the planet. It is the Earth's circulatory system, its quiet heartbeat, linking all oceans, distributing life-giving warmth, and maintaining a delicate balance, all with the unhurried, peaceful rhythm of geological time. It is the planet breathing, slowly, deeply, connecting everything in one vast watery hug. The water moves, unseen, unheard, yet utterly essential. A silent engine working constantly, patiently, to keep our world habitable, cradling us all in its slow, global embrace. Now, let's follow that warmth as it completes its journey, returning towards the surface, basking once more in the gentle touch of sunlight after its long, deep voyage. Imagine this water, having traveled through the dark abyssal plains, slowly, patiently rising, rejoining the upper layers of the ocean, particularly in the vast, sun-drenched expanses nearer the equator. Here, under the generous gaze of the tropical sun, the water drinks in the heat, day after day, becoming a reservoir of warmth. It's no longer the dense, cold traveler of the depths, but something lighter, more buoyant, brimming with stored solar energy. And it begins to move again, not downwards this time, but across the surface, embarking on a different kind of journey. These are the surface currents, great rivers flowing within the ocean, often guided by the prevailing winds that skim across the water, nudging them along vast, circling paths. But they carry more than just water. They carry the memory of the sun, the accumulated warmth gathered over immense distances in countless hours. Think of these currents as slow, deliberate brushstrokes of warmth being painted across the cooler canvases of the higher latitudes. They are the carriers of comfort, the distributors of the sun's generosity, moving heat away from the tropics where it is abundant, towards regions that would otherwise be much, much colder. It's here we find the ocean acting like a tender hand, carefully spreading a warm blanket over distant lands. Picture a vast, invisible blanket, woven from sun-warmed water, being gently drawn across the shoulders of continents thousands of miles away from the equator. This blanket isn't made of wool or down, but of moving warmth, a constant, slow release of heat from the water into the air above it. As these warm currents travel poleward, the air that touches them is warmed, like holding your hands over a gentle source of heat. This warmed air, carrying extra moisture evaporated from the ocean's surface, is then carried inland by the winds, bringing a milder, softer climate to coastal regions that might otherwise face much harsher conditions. Consider the North Atlantic, where a particularly famous current, the Gulf Stream, performs this warming miracle. Born in the warm embrace of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, it surges northwards, a powerful river of warm, salty water flowing within the cooler Atlantic. You can sometimes even see the difference. Its water's often a deeper, clearer blue compared to the surrounding sea. It carries an astonishing amount of heat, energy equivalent to many times the world's total power consumption, all moving silently, steadily northward. As it travels past the eastern coast of North America, it begins its long, slow arc across the vast expanse of the ocean towards Europe. Imagine this river of warmth, wider than any river on land, flowing persistently across the cold Atlantic. As it moves, it doesn't keep all its warmth locked away. It generously shares it with the atmosphere. The winds blowing over this relatively warm water pick up heat and moisture. Think of the breath of the ocean, warmed by this current, sighing gently towards the east. These prevailing westerly winds, now imbued with oceanic warmth, drift towards the shores of Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Scandinavia. And what a difference this warm breath makes. It's the reason why palm trees can, rather unexpectedly, be found growing in sheltered gardens in Cornwall or the west coast of Scotland, latitudes far higher than where you might normally expect them. It's why harbors in Norway, facing the open Atlantic, often remain ice-free through the winter, while ports much further south, but located on inland seas or the coasts of continents less touched by this warmth, are frozen solid. This oceanic blanket moderates the winters, making them milder, damper, and often cloudier than they would otherwise be. It softens the edge of the cold, preventing the deep, penetrating frosts found inland at similar latitudes, like across the vast plains of Canada or Siberia. Picture the landscape under this gentle influence. Imagine soft rain falling instead of biting snow, green fields persisting longer into the autumn and returning earlier in the spring. Think of the damp, mossy woodlands, the misty mornings where the slightly warmer, moist air from the sea meets the cooler land. This isn't the dramatic, searing heat of the tropics, but a persistent, gentle warmth, a subtle moderation that shapes ecosystems and human life in profound ways. It's a quiet gift from the ocean, delivered steadily across thousands of miles. It's the warm blanket effect, working silently season after season, year after year. This current, the Gulf Stream, eventually branches and slows as it reaches the northeastern Atlantic, becoming the North Atlantic Drift. Its warmth continues to spread, influencing the climate as far north as the Arctic coasts of Norway. The water, having given up much of its heat to the overlying air, becomes cooler and denser. Here, in the colder northern seas, particularly around Greenland and Iceland, the conditions become right for this water, now chilled and saltier due to evaporation during its long journey, to once again grow heavy and begin its slow descent into the deep ocean, starting the great cycle anew. The blanket, having delivered its warmth, is folded away into the depths, ready for its next long, cold journey. But this isn't the only place the ocean spreads its warmth. Similar currents operate in other ocean basins. In the Pacific, the Kuroshio Current, sometimes called the Japan Current, performs a similar role. It flows northward along the coast of Asia, bringing warmth from the tropics towards Japan and beyond. Like the Gulf Stream, it carries immense heat and moisture, blessing nearby lands with milder climates than their latitude would suggest, influencing rainfall patterns and softening the winters along the coast. It too is a river of warmth, a Pacific counterpart to the Atlantic's gentle giant, contributing to this global pattern of heat distribution, another fold in the planet's warm blanket. These warm surface currents are not just passive carriers, they are dynamic parts of the climate system. Their paths can meander and shift slightly, their strength can fluctuate. Sometimes they form large swirling eddies, like slow-motion whirlpools, spinning off the main flow and carrying pockets of warm water into cooler regions, or drawing colder water into the warm stream. These are like ripples and folds appearing in the vast blanket as it is spread. Imagine the sheer scale of this movement. Vast quantities of water, constantly flowing, carrying the thermal energy equivalent of millions of power stations, all driven by the interplay of sun, wind, and the Earth's rotation. It's a slow, steady, silent distribution network for warmth. Without this oceanic heat transport, the temperature differences between the equator and the poles would be far more extreme. Equatorial regions would be scorchingly hot, while temperate and polar latitudes would be locked in a much deeper, more persistent cold. The world we know, with its diverse climates and ecosystems, is profoundly shaped by this ceaseless, gentle spreading of warmth by the ocean currents. So, when you feel a mild breeze on a winter's day in a coastal town far from the tropics, pause for a moment. Consider that the softness in the air, the absence of a bitter chill, might be a gift carried across thousands of miles of open ocean. It's the lingering touch of tropical sunshine, delivered by a vast, slow-moving river within the sea. It is the ocean, breathing out warmth, sharing the sun's energy, wrapping the land in a comforting, invisible embrace. It's the feeling of that warm blanket, spread carefully by unseen currents, moderating, softening, and making life possible in places that would otherwise be harsh and forbidding. It's another aspect of the ocean's silent, tireless work, constantly balancing the planet's heat budget, ensuring that warmth finds its way to the colder corners of our world, all with the quiet persistence of water following its ancient, sun-warmed paths across the globe. The blanket settles, light and vast, a testament to the interconnectedness of our world, stitched together by wind and water, warmth and cold, in a slow, enduring dance. But this vast, watery embrace offers more than just shared warmth, more than a comforting blanket spread against the chill. The ocean, in its profound wisdom and ceaseless motion, understands balance. Just as it carries the sun's generosity away from the fervent tropics, it also draws coolness from the planet's quiet, frigid corners, and from its own deep, hidden places, offering it gently back to those sun-drenched realms. It's a reciprocal gesture, a necessary counterpoint in the Earth's great thermal dance. Imagine it not as a blanket now, but as a slow, deliberate offering of refreshment, a cool sip for the thirsty tropics. This cooling journey often begins far, far away in the hushed realms of ice and twilight near the poles. Here, under skies often gray or lit by the low slanting sun, the surface water grows intensely cold. Salt is expelled as sea ice forms, making the remaining water not only frigid but also denser, heavier. It's a weight born of cold and salinity, a heaviness that pulls it downwards. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, this water begins to sink. It cascades gently off continental shelves, a silent waterfall descending into the immense darkness of the deep ocean basins. Down it slides, joining other cold waters, forming vast, slow-moving rivers that creep along the contours of the ocean floor. Think of these deep currents as the hidden counterpart to the sun-warmed surface flows. They are the quiet, returning streams, flowing beneath the vibrant, sunlit world we easily imagine. Down in the abyss, thousands of meters below the waves and the wind, the water is near freezing, moving with an almost geological patience. It carries the memory of polar winters, of ice fields and biting winds held within its dense, cold heart. This water might travel for centuries, a slow, dark pilgrimage across the seabed, traversing entire ocean basins in profound silence, untouched by the storms and seasons playing out far above. It is a world away from the shimmering heat of the tropics, yet its destination often lies precisely there. How does this profound coolness, locked away in the deep, offer its refreshing touch to the warm surface waters? The connection happens through a subtle, often unseen process, frequently occurring along the western edges of continents. Here, prevailing winds, blowing steadily across the ocean surface, can act like a gentle but persistent hand, pushing the warm surface water away from the coastline. As this sun-warmed layer is nudged offshore, something remarkable occurs. Nature, abhorring a vacuum, needs to fill the space left behind. And what rises to take its place is not more warm water from nearby, but the cold, deep water that has been traveling patiently below. This phenomenon is called upwelling. Picture it as the ocean gently drawing a deep, cool breath near the shore. The water that emerges is startlingly different from the surrounding tropical sea. It's colder, sometimes dramatically so, changing the very feel of the coastal climate. It might carry a different hue, sometimes appearing greener or cloudier, not with pollutants, but with the very essence of life drawn up from the depths. This isn't a violent eruption, but a slow, broad, rising, a vast volume of coolness welling up from below, spreading across the surface like a soothing balm. This upwelled water is the cool sip the tropics receive. It's a vital refreshment delivered directly from the planet's colder reserves or the deep ocean storehouse, where the sun's energy beats down relentlessly, threatening to overheat the surface waters. This infusion of coolness provides a crucial tempering effect. It prevents coastal waters in some tropical and subtropical regions from becoming excessively warm, creating conditions more amenable to a wider range of life. It's like opening a window in a warm room, allowing a gentle, cooling draft to circulate, preventing the air from becoming stagnant and overly hot. The ocean performs this service constantly, tirelessly, in specific, crucial locations around the globe. Consider the coast of Peru, where the Humboldt Current brings a powerful stream of cool water northward from the Antarctic region. This isn't solely a surface current. It involves significant upwelling along the South American coast. The result is a coastal climate far cooler and drier than one might expect at such latitudes, and waters that teem with life. Or, think of the California Current, sweeping cool water down the western coast of North America, moderating the climate of California and supporting rich marine ecosystems, including vast kelp forests that thrive in cooler conditions. Similar processes occur off the coasts of Northwest and Southwest Africa, and other regions touched by these subtle, cooling influences. These areas of upwelling are not just cooler, they are incredibly fertile. The deep water, having been away from the sunlight and surface life for so long, hasn't had its nutrients depleted. Down in the dark, the slow decay of organic matter raining from above enriches the water with essential elements, nitrates, phosphates, silicates. These are the fundamental building blocks for life, the fertilizers of the sea. When this cold, nutrient-laden water rises into the sunlit zone, it's like bringing rich, dark soil up into a waiting garden. Phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that form the base of the marine food web, bloom explosively in these conditions. They find everything they need: sunlight from above and a sudden abundance of nutrients from below. These blooms turn the water into a thick, living soup, visible even from space as swirls of green and turquoise. This explosion of primary productivity fuels an astonishing chain of life. Tiny zooplankton graze on the phytoplankton, small fish feed on the zooplankton, larger fish and marine mammals prey on the smaller fish, and seabirds flock in vast numbers to feast on the bounty. These upwelling zones, driven by the delivery of cool, deep water, become some of the most productive fishing grounds on the entire planet. They are oases of abundance, standing in stark contrast to the often clearer, less nutrient-rich waters of the open tropical ocean. The cool sip delivered by the currents is, in effect, also a life-giving elixir, a source of nourishment drawn up from the quiet, patient depths. It demonstrates how the ocean's circulatory system doesn't just regulate temperature, it also distributes the very ingredients necessary for life to flourish on a grand scale. So, the ocean's currents work in both directions, weaving a complex pattern of thermal exchange. They carry warmth away from the equator, preventing overheating and sharing solar energy with colder latitudes, the warm blanket effect. Simultaneously, they facilitate the return flow of cold water, both along the surface from higher latitudes and, perhaps more profoundly, through the slow, deep pathways culminating in upwelling. This return journey brings necessary cooling and vital nutrients to sunnier climes, the refreshing sip. It's another layer to the silent, intricate work of the ocean currents. They are not just conveyor belts for heat, but a dynamic system constantly seeking equilibrium. The sinking of cold water at the poles and its slow journey through the abyss is as crucial to the planet's climate as the northward flow of the Gulf Stream. The gentle rise of this deep water along coastal margins is a fundamental process that shapes regional climates, supports unique ecosystems, and provides sustenance for millions. Feel the coolness of the sea breeze on a warm day near a coast known for upwelling. That refreshing touch isn't just the air, it's influenced by the vast expanse of cooler water brought to the surface by unseen forces. It's the ocean exhaling coolness, tempering the sun's strength, offering relief. It's the legacy of polar chill, traveling silently for decades or centuries through the crushing pressure and darkness of the deep sea, finally returning to the light. It's the cool drink, offered patiently, sustainingly, to the warmer parts of our world. This constant exchange, this giving and receiving of warmth and coolness, is the heartbeat of the planet's climate system. The currents are the arteries and veins, ensuring that energy and resources are circulated, that extremes are moderated, that balance is maintained. The warm blanket and the cool sip are two sides of the same coin, two aspects of the ocean's ceaseless, quiet labor to make our world habitable, diverse, and resilient. It is a slow, deep rhythm, the planet breathing in and breathing out, mediated by the silent, powerful flow of water across its surface and through its depths. The currents continue their ancient paths, a testament to the interconnectedness of all things, ensuring that even the warmest places receive their measure of coolness, drawn from the deep, quiet heart of the sea. Imagine resting your hand, just for a moment, on the surface of the sea. Feel its temperature, perhaps cool and bracing, perhaps surprisingly warm. Now, imagine the air doing the same, resting upon that vast, liquid surface, day after day, night after night. The air, like a light blanket itself, begins to take on the character of the water beneath. Over the great warm currents, those rivers of heat flowing through the cooler ocean, the air feels this warmth directly. It's like leaning close to a gently radiating hearth. This warmth encourages the water. It coaxes it. Tiny, invisible particles of water, energized by the heat, loosen their bonds with their neighbors. They lift, lighter than air, rising up from the surface in a constant, unseen migration. This is evaporation, but think of it less as a process and more as the ocean's quiet exhalation. A slow, steady release of moisture into the arms of the atmosphere. Imagine this gentle lifting happening across immense stretches of the ocean, a continuous, invisible shimmering rising from the sun-warmed blue, carrying the ocean's essence into the air. It happens molecule by molecule, a silent offering rising from millions of square miles of warm sea surface. It's not a forceful boiling, but a gentle persuasion, a continuous lifting, like morning mist rising from a meadow, but on an oceanic scale. The air drinks this moisture in, becoming humid, soft, laden with the potential for cloud, for rain, for dew. It carries the subtle scent of the sea, the promise of water held in invisible suspension. These warm currents, like the famous Gulf Stream pushing its warmth towards northern Europe, or the Kuroshio Current bathing the coasts of Japan in milder temperatures, are immense pathways, not just for the warmth they carry across the globe, but for countless, almost invisible lives held within their gentle, persistent flow. Imagine stepping down, shrinking smaller and smaller, until the vastness of the ocean becomes a universe. And the current, this slow river within the sea, is your entire world. Here, suspended in the water column, begins another journey, quieter, still, carried along on the same currents that warm the air above. This is the journey of the tiny drifters, the plankton, the living dust of the sea. They are infinitesimally small, these travelers. Some are plants, the phytoplankton, each one a microscopic jewel catching the faint sunlight that filters down from the world above. Picture them, tiny spheres of the most delicate green, intricate stars spun from silica glass, minute chains linked together like the finest beaded necklaces. They hold the sun's energy within their fragile forms, breathing life into the water itself. They don't swim with purpose. They simply are, suspended, held, gently nudged along by the water's unhurried pace. They are the meadows of the sea, unseen pastures blooming in the blue depths, relying entirely on the current to carry them through zones of light and nutrient, a slow, sun-drenched pilgrimage without volition. Beside them, or perhaps gently bumping against them in the slow-motion dance of the drift, are the zooplankton, tiny animals, some no bigger than a pinhead, others like intricate, glassy bells or feathery arrows. There are minuscule crustaceans, resembling specks of translucent shrimp, their legs paddling softly not to fight the current, but perhaps just to orient themselves within its hold. There are larval forms of larger creatures, crabs, barnacles, fish, spending their earliest days as passive wanderers, entrusted completely to the ocean's cradling flow. Imagine a baby crab, barely visible, curled within its temporary drifting home, waiting for the current to deliver it somewhere, someday where it might settle and grow. Others are stranger still, shimmering jellies pulsating with a slow internal rhythm, transparent beings catching the light in fleeting rainbows. Their journey is one of utter surrender. There is no struggle against the inevitable push of the water. They yield, completely and peacefully, to the direction of the flow. Feel what it might be like. A state of near weightlessness, constantly supported, constantly moved. It's like being held in an enormous, liquid hand that never tires, never falters, just rocks you gently, endlessly onward. The water slides past, or rather, they slide with it, part of its very substance. Days and nights merge into a slow rhythm of changing light and subtle shifts in temperature. During the day, sunlight penetrates the upper layers. It filters down in shimmering shafts, turning the water into a cathedral of moving light. For the phytoplankton, this is the time of quiet work, absorbing the light, transforming it into life. The water near the surface might feel a fraction warmer, stirred by the sun's energy that also drives the evaporation far above. The tiny drifters rise and fall subtly within this upper layer, perhaps lifted slightly by the day's warmth and mixing, then settling slowly as the light fades. Colors here are blues and greens, pierced by the sunbeams that spotlight the swirling motes of life, catching on a glassy shell here, a filament of algae there. It's a silent, sunlit ballet, choreographed by the unseen hand of the current. As daylight softens, merging into the long twilight of the underwater world, the mood shifts. The light becomes diffuse, gentler, the sharp beams replaced by a pervasive, deepening blue. Some of the zooplankton, those that prefer the dimmer conditions or follow the daily rhythm of their own food sources, begin a slow vertical migration, not swimming powerfully, but adjusting their buoyancy, drifting downwards, away from the surface, into the cooler, darker layers below. Imagine them sinking like snowflakes in reverse, descending through the water column into the quiet hush of the deeper twilight zone. Night falls fully, and the world transforms again. The sun's warmth is a memory held in the upper water, but down here, it's cooler, calmer. The darkness is profound, an enveloping velvet cloak, yet it is rarely absolute, for this is often the time when the ocean reveals its hidden lights, bioluminescence. Tiny sparks flare and fade as some drifters, certain plankton, small jellies, create their own cold, brief light. A disturbance, a gentle swirl in the current, might set off a chain reaction, a momentary constellation of living stars shimmering in the blackness before fading back into invisibility. It's a secret language spoken in pulses of light, a silent, ghostly communication in the deep, carried along on the same slow, inexorable drift. The journey has no map, no destination consciously sought. The current dictates the path. It might carry a cluster of phytoplankton towards a region richer in nutrients, allowing them to bloom, dividing and multiplying in the gentle flow. It might carry a larval fish towards a coastal area where it can finally settle. Or it might carry them out further into the vast open ocean, part of a slow gyre that turns over years, decades, centuries. They pass through different water masses, subtle boundaries where temperature or salinity changes slightly, barely perceptible shifts in their liquid environment. They are carried over unseen underwater mountains and valleys, their passage marked only by the slow, steady movement of the water itself. Sometimes, the drifters encounter others. Not necessarily predators in this calm imagining, but perhaps a larger, slow-moving creature drifts by, a translucent salp chain, linked like a string of glassy beads, pulsing gently as it filters the water. Or a jellyfish, trailing its tentacles like silken threads, moves with the same languid grace, also a creature of the current. These encounters are fleeting, ships passing in the dim light, part of the same slow, watery procession. The drifters might be gently nudged aside by the pressure wave of a larger body, only to settle back into their previous path once it has passed, undisturbed in their essential peace. Think of the scale of it. Each individual drifter is tiny, almost nothing, yet together they form a vast, living soup, the very foundation of life in the sea. They exist in numbers that defy imagination. Millions, billions, trillions in every cubic meter of water, swirling, drifting, living, and dying within these immense oceanic rivers. They are the base of the great marine food web, the sustenance for countless other creatures, yet their own existence is predominantly one of passive travel, a quiet existence dictated by the physics of water in motion. Their lives are short, often measured in days or weeks, but their collective journey is timeless. As individuals perish, others divide or hatch, taking their place in the endless stream. The current continues, impartial, perpetual. It carried the ancestors of these tiny beings, and it will carry their descendants. It is a conveyor belt of life, operating on a planetary scale, powered by the sun's heat, the Earth's rotation, the wind's whisper across the surface. Feel the deep, resonant quiet of this world. There are no sharp edges, no sudden noises. Sounds from the surface world are muffled, distant. The primary sensation is the constant, gentle pressure of the water, the feeling of being suspended and moved. It's a slow, dreamy adventure, a liquid lullaby sung by the earth itself. The tiny drifters, unaware of the continents they pass, the climates they influence indirectly through their sheer collective mass and their role in the carbon cycle, simply exist in their drifting state. They are carried along through sunlight and darkness, warmth and coolness, life and renewal, embodying the peaceful, persistent, and silent power of the ocean currents, those hidden engines shaping our world, cradling its smallest inhabitants on their unending, gentle voyage. Imagine them now, countless specks of life, drifting, dreaming, in the slow, deep rivers of the sea. Now, let your awareness drift away from those tiny individual lives, countless as stars in the night sky, and feel instead the water that holds them. Imagine the sheer volume of it, the vastness of this liquid realm. This water, the medium of their journey, is not uniform. It possesses qualities that shift and change across the immense distances it travels. One of the most fundamental of these qualities is its warmth, or its coolness. Like a living thing, the ocean breathes in heat, holds it, and carries it across the globe in a slow, deliberate dance that shapes the world above. Think of the sun, our star, pouring its energy down onto the earth. Much of this energy falls upon the wide, receptive surface of the ocean, particularly in the belt around the planet's middle, the tropics. Here, the sun's gaze is most direct, most intense for much of the year. The water's surface drinks in this warmth, day after day. It doesn't boil or steam away violently, Instead, it gently absorbs the heat, storing it within its moving mass. Layer upon layer of sun-kissed water forms, warmer, lighter, holding the energy of distant sunlight deep within its blue embrace. If this warmth simply stayed where it was absorbed, the tropics would become unbearably hot, a sweltering zone hostile to much of the life we know. The water would grow warmer and warmer, holding on to that relentless solar energy. Further away from the equator, towards the Earth's poles, the sun's rays arrive at a slant. They glance off the surface, delivering less energy, less warmth. Here, the ocean feels the chill of long winters, the touch of ice. The water grows cold, dense, heavy. If this chill were isolated, the polar regions would plunge into temperatures far colder than they already experience, locking even more of the world in ice, making vast regions inhospitable. We would have a planet of extremes, a fiercely hot middle and desperately cold ends. But the ocean does not sit still. It is not a collection of isolated ponds. It is a single connected body, and within it flow the currents, those slow, deep rivers we have imagined. And just as they carry the tiny drifters, these currents carry warmth and coolness. They act as the Earth's great moderator, a gentle, planetary-scale system for sharing heat, ensuring that no part of our world becomes too fiercely hot or too bitterly cold. It's like a vast, silent circulatory system, not for blood, but for warmth itself. Imagine those sun-warmed waters near the equator. Buoyant and light, they begin to move, nudged by the winds blowing consistently across the surface, guided by the slow turning of the Earth itself. Great rivers of warm water, wider than any river on land, begin to flow away from the tropics, carrying their stored solar energy towards the cooler parts of the world. Think of the Gulf Stream, a famous example of these warm messengers. It gathers heat in the warm Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico, becoming a distinct flow of incredibly warm, deep blue water. Then, it travels northwards, diagonally across the vast Atlantic. It flows past coasts that would otherwise be much colder. As this river of warmth journeys north, it doesn't hold on to its heat possessively. It generously shares it with the air above. The warmth radiates gently upwards, like the subtle heat rising from a warm stone long after the sun has set. Winds blowing across this warm current pick up the heat and moisture and carry them over nearby lands. This is why Western Europe, for instance, enjoys climates much milder than regions at similar latitudes in other parts of the world. The gentle breath of the ocean, warmed far away in the tropics and delivered by the current, softens the winters, allowing palms to grow in places that might otherwise see harsh frosts. It's a gift of warmth, delivered silently, persistently, across thousands of miles of open ocean. The current acts like a slow-release radiator, warming the atmosphere and making coastal lands more welcoming. Similar warm currents exist in other oceans, performing the same quiet service. They flow south from the equator towards the Antarctic and across the wide Pacific, carrying tropical heat to distant shores, moderating climates, making coastlines habitable, influencing weather patterns in ways we barely perceive in our daily lives. They are the gentle distributors of the sun's energy, preventing its concentration in one place and spreading its benefits far and wide. The movement is slow, often imperceptible from moment to moment, but its cumulative effect over seasons and years is profound. It's a steady, reliable transfer, a fundamental balancing act performed by the water itself. But what happens to this water as it travels further from the equator and releases its stored warmth? As the heat gently leaves the water and warms the air, the water itself begins to cool. It becomes denser, heavier. This transformation is especially pronounced in the high latitudes, near the poles, particularly in the North Atlantic and around Antarctica. Here, the water, having traveled far and given up much of its tropical heat, encounters bitterly cold winds and sometimes even the freezing touch of sea ice. As it chills further, and as some surface water freezes into ice, the remaining liquid water becomes not only colder but also saltier, because the forming ice leaves the salt behind. This combination of cold temperature and higher salinity makes the water exceptionally dense. It becomes heavier than the water around and beneath it, and so it begins a slow, majestic descent. Imagine this water, having completed its surface journey, now sinking gently downwards, leaving the sunlit world behind. It sinks, not in a sudden plunge, but in a gradual settling, drawn by its own weight into the deep, dark abyss of the ocean floor. Down it goes, hundreds, even thousands of meters, finding its place in the cold, quiet depths. Here, far below the wind and waves, far from the sun's warmth, it joins other deep, cold currents. These are the counterpart to the warm surface flows, the return journey in the ocean's great circulatory system. These deep currents creep along the ocean floor, flowing back towards the equator, carrying the memory of polar cold. Their movement is incredibly slow, sometimes taking centuries to complete a circuit. They are hidden rivers, moving in darkness and under immense pressure, unseen and unfelt by the world above. Yet, they are crucial. They carry vast amounts of cold water away from the poles, preventing the polar oceans from becoming ever colder and freezing solid. And eventually, after their long, slow journey through the deep, this cold water gradually rises back towards the surface in various parts of the world, often in areas known as upwelling zones. As it rises, it brings not only its coolness to temper the surface warmth, but also nutrients from the deep sea floor, providing sustenance for the very plankton we first pictured, completing another vital cycle. This entire process, the movement of warm water away from the equator on the surface, the release of heat, the cooling and sinking of water near the poles, and the slow return journey of cold water through the depths, is known as the global ocean conveyor belt, or thermohaline circulation driven by temperature, thermo, and salinity, haline. But thinking of it as a conveyor belt, while useful, perhaps sounds too mechanical. It's more like a slow, planetary breathing. The ocean inhales warmth at the equator, circulates it gently, exhales it towards the poles, inhales the cold polar air, sinks, and flows slowly back through the depths to begin again. It acts like a gentle, natural thermostat for our planet. It doesn't click on and off sharply. Instead, it works constantly, subtly, smoothing out the temperature differences across the globe. It prevents the extremes that would otherwise make Earth a much harsher place. It helps keep the planet cozy, that comfortable, just right temperature range that allows such a diversity of life to flourish, both in the sea and on land. Without this constant, slow circulation, the equatorial regions would be hotter, the polar regions colder, and the weather patterns across the globe would be drastically different, likely far more violent and extreme. Feel the quiet power in this constant balancing act. It happens on a scale difficult to comprehend, involving unimaginable volumes of water moving across immense distances, driven by subtle differences in temperature and saltiness, nudged by wind and the Earth's spin. It connects the heat of the tropics to the chill of the poles in a continuous, fluid embrace. It is the ocean's silent work, maintaining the equilibrium, keeping our world comfortable. It is the gentle pulse of the planet's climate system, a slow, deep rhythm that underpins the stability we often take for granted. The tiny drifters we imagined earlier are carried within this grand system, unwitting passengers on these globe-spanning flows. Their existence is tied to the temperature of the water that surrounds them, a temperature regulated by these very currents. The warmth allows life to bloom. The currents distribute that warmth, extending the reach of habitable zones. The cold, deep currents replenish nutrients, fueling the base of the food web upon which those drifters depend. It is all connected, from the smallest microbe to the largest climatic patterns. So, as you picture the deep, quiet ocean, remember this hidden work. Remember the slow rivers of warmth flowing near the surface, sharing their heat with the air, softening winters on distant shores. Remember the equally slow, invisible rivers of cold water creeping through the abyss, carrying the polar chill back towards the equator. Remember this vast, gentle system of circulation, the Earth's watery thermostat, tirelessly working to keep our planet cozy, maintaining the delicate balance that makes this blue sphere a haven for life, a cradle, not just for the tiny drifters, but for us all. It is another layer of the ocean current's role as Earth's silent, powerful climate engine, operating constantly, peacefully, beneath the waves. Let us journey now, in our minds, to the planet's lonely polar realms, the places where the sun hangs low in the sky for months on end, or disappears entirely, leaving the world to the stars and the shimmering curtains of the aurora. Here, at the top and bottom of our world, in the vast, frigid expanses of the Arctic and the waters surrounding the great white continent of Antarctica, the ocean meets the sky in a way that feels ancient and profound. The air itself is sharp, biting, carrying the scent of ice and immense distance. It steals warmth relentlessly, pulling heat away from anything warmer than itself. And the ocean surface, exposed to this profound chill, begins a slow, quiet transformation. Imagine a patch of seawater, far north or far south, under a sky heavy with gray cloud or ablaze with cold stars. The wind, a restless spirit of the poles, sweeps across the water's surface. It's not just moving the water, creating waves that slap against ice floes. It's also carrying away the water's precious heat, little by little, breath by icy breath. Think of how your own warm breath clouds the air on a frosty morning, a visible sign of the heat leaving you for the colder surroundings. The ocean, in these polar regions, is constantly breathing out its warmth into the immensely cold, dry air above it. As the surface water loses its heat, its very nature begins to change, subtly but significantly. Water, as you know, is made of tiny molecules, always jiggling and moving. Warmth gives them energy, makes them dance apart, taking up more space. But as the cold deepens, it's like a hush falling over that molecular dance. The jiggling slows, the energy drains away. The molecules move less vigorously. They draw closer together, huddling for warmth that isn't there. They begin to pack themselves more tightly, occupying less volume. Picture a crowd of people milling about energetically. They take up a lot of room. Now imagine them slowing down, standing closer together, shoulder to shoulder. The same number of people now fit into a smaller space. It's similar with the cooling water molecules. As they snuggle closer, the water becomes denser. A cupful of this cold water now weighs slightly more than a cupful of the warmer water nearby. It has become heavier, more substantial, simply by releasing its heat to the biting polar air. But the cold is only half the story of this deepening weight. There is another crucial ingredient in these polar seas: salt. Ocean water, unlike the water in our lakes and rivers, is salty. Dissolved within it are minerals, salts washed down from the land over millions of years, carried by rivers, and concentrated in the vast ocean basins. This saltiness is part of the ocean's character, influencing its taste, its feel, and critically, its weight. Now, watch closely as the temperature of the surface water continues to drop, pushed by the relentless cold. It reaches the freezing point, but ocean water, because of its saltiness, freezes at a lower temperature than fresh water, typically around minus 1.9 degrees Celsius, or about 28.5 degrees Fahrenheit. As it reaches this threshold, something magical and important happens. Sea ice begins to form. It doesn't happen all at once, like flipping a switch. It starts delicately. Tiny needle-like crystals of pure water, called Brazil ice, begin to appear in the supercooled surface layer. They look like shimmering dust or tiny shards scattered through the dark water. These crystals grow, bumping into each other, linking up, forming a thin, greasy-looking film on the surface known as grease ice. As the cold persists, this layer thickens, solidifies, becoming stronger, eventually forming vast sheets or drifting pans of sea ice, a floating white landscape that transforms the ocean's surface. But here is the key. When water freezes, it forms a crystalline structure, a lattice. And this structure is very particular about what it includes. It prefers only water molecules. The salt, the dissolved minerals that were mixed throughout the liquid water, doesn't fit neatly into this rigid ice crystal lattice. So, as the ice crystals grow, they push the salt out. They reject it. The ice itself becomes relatively fresh, while the salt that was previously dissolved in the now frozen water gets left behind, concentrated in the remaining unfrozen liquid nearby. Imagine squeezing a sponge soaked in salty water. The water that comes out is salty, while the sponge material itself isn't. The formation of sea ice acts in a similar way, squeezing the salt out into the surrounding seawater. Pockets of very salty, very cold water, called brine, become trapped within the ice structure or drain downwards into the ocean below. The overall effect is that the water just beneath the forming ice becomes significantly saltier than it was before. So now we have two processes working together in these polar regions, driven by the intense cold. The water is losing heat to the atmosphere, causing its molecules to slow down and pack more tightly together, increasing its density. At the same time, as sea ice forms, salt is being excluded from the ice and concentrated in the remaining liquid water, making that water even denser still. Salt itself adds weight to water, and now we have more salt crammed into the same volume of water, alongside the density increase from the cold. This combination, extreme cold and high salinity, creates patches of surface water that are exceptionally dense, exceptionally heavy compared to the water surrounding them, and, crucially, compared to the water lying beneath them. It's like a transformation has occurred, turning ordinary seawater into something weighted, laden, poised on the edge of a great change. For a while, this dense water might linger near the surface, perhaps mixed by the wind, but eventually, its weight becomes too much. It is heavier than the water below it, and just as a stone dropped into a pond will sink, this dense, cold, salty water begins to sink too. There's no dramatic plunge, no sudden waterfall into the abyss. It's a slow, gentle, almost imperceptible process, but it is relentless, driven by the fundamental force of gravity acting on this subtle difference in weight. Picture vast areas of the polar oceans where this process is happening. Not a single point, but huge regions where the surface conditions have conspired to create this heavy water. And slowly, inexorably, this water starts its downward journey. It eases itself downwards, displacing the slightly lighter, less dense water beneath it. It slides and settles, drifting down through the water column like a vast, invisible curtain descending into darkness. Down it goes, leaving the wind-whipped, ice-strewn surface world behind. Down, past the layers where sunlight penetrates, into the twilight zone, and further still, into the perpetual night of the deep ocean. The pressure mounts immensely as it sinks, but the water itself is incompressible. It simply continues its slow surrender to gravity. Down, 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 perhaps slipping along the slope of the underwater continental shelf in some regions, or sinking more directly into deep basins in others. This sinking doesn't happen everywhere, only in a few special locations, primarily in the North Atlantic, near Greenland and Iceland, and in the Antarctic region, particularly in the Weddell and Ross Seas. These are the planet's deep water factories, the places where the journey into the abyss begins. The water carries the memory of the surface with it, the profound cold it acquired from the polar air, the extra load of salt it gained from the formation of ice. It is now fundamentally different water, dense and oxygen-rich from its time at the surface, and as it reaches the bottom layers of the ocean, thousands of meters below the surface, it doesn't just stop. It begins to spread out, to flow, starting a journey that will take it across ocean basins around the globe for potentially hundreds, even thousands of years. This sinking, this heavy waters dive, is the birth of the deep ocean currents. It is the engine starting up, the first push that sets the great, slow, deep conveyor belt in motion. It is the connection between the harsh, cold surface of the polar world and the vast, hidden depths of the global ocean. It is the beginning of that slow, invisible river of cold water we spoke of earlier, creeping through the abyss, carrying the polar chill away, destined eventually, after a long, long time, to rise again somewhere else entirely. So, as you settle deeper into quiet stillness, imagine this slow, majestic descent. Feel the chill of the polar air. See the delicate formation of ice crystals pushing salt away. Sense the growing weight of the water near the surface. And then, picture its gentle, inevitable sinking. A vast, slow cascade into the dark, silent depths. The beginning of an immense, unseen journey that helps regulate the breath of our planet. It is a quiet process, hidden beneath icy seas at the ends of the earth, yet its influence reaches everywhere. A testament to the subtle power held within the cold, salty embrace of the deep polar ocean. This is where the deep journey starts, driven by the simple physics of cold and salt, a silent dive that initiates a global odyssey. And so, this great, slow dive continues, a constant, quiet pulse in the planet's hidden circulatory system. For ages upon ages, it has been this way, this dependable sinking in the cold polar seas, a rhythm as steady and familiar as the turning of the earth itself, a deep, resonant hum beneath the surface of things. It feels eternal, this process, like the stars wheeling overhead or the slow drift of continents, a fundamental beat in the long, slow song of our world. We've pictured that heavy water, rich with salt, chilled to the point of surrender, beginning its immense journey into the abyss. It's a cornerstone of how our ocean breathes, how heat travels, how the climate finds its balance. But now, let us listen even more closely, settling deeper into our quiet space. Imagine resting your ear against the vast body of the ocean, trying to catch the faintest variations in that deep, steady hum. Sometimes, even the most familiar lullabies, the ones sung for generations, begin to change, just slightly. A note held a little longer, a pause where there wasn't one before, a subtle shift in tempo. It's not a different song entirely, not yet, perhaps never, but it's enough to make you notice, to make you wonder. There are whispers, carried on the currents of air and water, suggesting that the rhythm of this deep ocean engine, this heavy waters dive, might be undergoing such a subtle change. The world, you see, is wrapping itself in a slightly warmer blanket. A gentle warmth, accumulating bit by bit over years and decades, is beginning to be felt even at the remote icy ends of the earth. It's like the faintest blush of dawn spreading across a sleeping landscape, almost imperceptible at first, but gradually altering the shades and tones of the world. This gentle warming touches the air, it touches the surface of the sea, and it touches the vast, ancient stores of ice that crown the poles and the high mountains. Think of the ice, the great white sheets covering Greenland and Antarctica, the floating castles of sea ice that expand and contract with the polar seasons. For millennia, they have held immense quantities of fresh water locked away. Now, imagine the touch of that warmer air, the kiss of slightly less frigid water. Slowly, painstakingly slowly, the ice begins to respond. It's not a sudden shattering, but a gradual loosening, a softening at the edges. Glaciers that have flowed at a stately pace for centuries might quicken their slide towards the sea. Sea ice might form a little later in the autumn, melt a little earlier in the spring, or become thinner, less expansive. Picture tiny rivulets of meltwater, like tears shed by ancient ice, trickling down glacier faces, pooling on the surface of sea ice, and eventually finding their way into the surrounding ocean. This water is fresh, pure, unsalted. As it mingles with the polar sea, it's like adding clear water to a salty broth. It dilutes the surface layer. Remember how crucial that saltiness was? How the ice formation squeezed out the salt, making the remaining water denser, heavier, compelling it to sink. Now, imagine that process being subtly counteracted. The meltwater gently reduces the overall saltiness of the surface water in these critical regions. It's as if the water is becoming just a little lighter, a fraction less dense than it used to be. The signal to sink, that strong gravitational pull born from intense cold and high salinity, might become a little less insistent. The water still gets cold. It still gets saltier than the layers beneath as some ice forms. But perhaps the difference isn't quite as stark as it once was. The heaviness that initiated the dive is subtly lessened. The cascade into the depths might become less of a determined plunge and more of a gentle slide, perhaps starting from a slightly shallower level, or carrying a little less volume with each downward pulse. The engine's first push, while still present, might lose some of its accustomed force. And then there's the warmth itself. The surface waters in these polar regions, though still profoundly cold to us, might not reach the extreme lows they once did, or they might stay slightly warmer for longer periods. Warmer water, as we know, is naturally less dense than colder water. So, this subtle warming also works against the sinking process. It adds another layer of buoyancy, another reason for the surface water to hesitate before taking that deep dive. The chill that drives the density increase is slightly less intense. The water loses a fraction of its downward ambition. Combine these two effects, the freshening from melting ice and the slight warming of the surface layers. Both gently conspire to make the surface water less dense, less inclined to sink, and begin that long journey into the abyss. It's like trying to push a slightly more buoyant object underwater. It requires more effort, or it simply doesn't sink as readily. So, what does this mean for the great ocean conveyor belt, that slow, planet-circling current we've been picturing? If the engine driving it, the sinking of dense water in the polar regions, becomes less vigorous, then the entire system might respond. Imagine that vast, slow conveyor belt, not stopping, but perhaps slowing its pace, just a fraction. The steady, reliable rhythm might become a little more languid, a little less forceful. The deep, cold river flowing through the abyss might carry less water or move with less urgency. The immense transfer of water from the surface to the deep, and eventually back again, could subtly diminish in volume or speed over long stretches of time. This isn't like flipping a switch. The ocean is too vast, its momentum too immense for abrupt changes on a human timescale. It's more like the gradual slowing of a massive, ancient flywheel. The change is slow, almost imperceptible year to year, but accumulating over decades, over centuries. It's a shift in the fundamental tempo of the ocean's deep circulation. The lullaby's rhythm is subtly altering, the beat softening, becoming perhaps a little less predictable. And because everything in the Earth's climate system is connected, like the threads in an immense, intricate tapestry, a change in this deep current resonates outwards, subtly influencing other parts of the world, often in ways that are complex and difficult to foresee. The transport of heat from the tropics towards the poles, a key function of these currents, might become less efficient. If less warm water flows poleward near the surface to replace the sinking cold water, regional climates, particularly in areas warmed by these currents like parts of northern Europe, might subtly adjust over long periods. Weather patterns, which rely on the distribution of heat and moisture influenced by ocean temperatures, could gradually shift their familiar tracks. The return journey, too, might change. If less water sinks in the polar regions, then perhaps less deep water rises elsewhere, in those areas of upwelling we haven't yet explored in detail. This upwelling brings vital nutrients from the deep sea back to the sunlit surface, feeding the base of marine food webs. A change in the pace of the deep currents could subtly alter the timing, location, or intensity of this nutrient return, potentially rippling through ocean ecosystems in ways we are only beginning to understand. It feels complex, perhaps even a little unsettling, to think of such a fundamental planetary rhythm changing. But it's important to hold on to the calmness, the quiet perspective. These are slow, subtle shifts, playing out in a system of immense scale and complexity. The ocean has navigated changes before, over geological time. It possesses a deep resilience, an ability to adjust and find new balances. Scientists are listening intently to these whispers of change. They deploy instruments into the harsh polar seas, track the temperature and salinity of the water column, use satellites to monitor ice melt and sea surface height, and run complex computer models to try and understand how these processes interact and what the future might hold. It's like trying to decipher a very faint message carried across a vast distance. The signals are subtle, often masked by the natural year-to-year variability of the ocean. Disentangling a long-term trend from the ocean's natural ebb and flow requires patience, careful observation, and a deep respect for the complexity of the system. There are no definitive answers yet about exactly how much the currents are changing, or what the precise consequences will be. The ocean holds its secrets close. It operates on timescales far longer than human lives, and its interconnected processes are still being unraveled. What we sense is a potential shift, a subtle modulation in the deep planetary rhythm we've come to understand. The familiar lullaby of the ocean currents seems to be incorporating new, quiet notes, a slightly altered tempo that invites us to listen more carefully, to observe with greater attention. So, as you rest, let your mind drift with this idea, not with alarm, but with quiet contemplation. Picture the vastness of the ocean, the immense power held within its slow, deep movements. Acknowledge the subtle warmth touching the poles, the fresh water sighing from the melting ice, the slight hesitation in the water's great dive. Feel the interconnectedness of it all, how a change at one end of the earth can ripple outwards, subtly influencing the breadth and balance of the entire planet. The deep, silent engine continues its work, but its rhythm may be evolving, adapting to a changing world. It remains a vital part of Earth's climate, a testament to the profound and intricate dance of water, salt, and temperature, even as the steps of that dance undergo a slow, quiet transformation. The song continues, but we are learning to listen for the nuances in its age-old melody. Let your awareness soften now, releasing the edges of the day. Allow the gentle rhythm of your own breath to deepen, to slow, mirroring the quiet pulse of the planet itself. Feel the weight of your body resting, supported, secure. And as you rest, let your mind untether, drifting easily away from the shore of wakefulness, floating out onto the surface of a vast, calm sea within your imagination. Picture yourself suspended, not in air, but in the clear, supportive embrace of water. The surface shimmers above, perhaps catching the last glints of twilight or the soft glow of moonlight, but you are sinking gently beneath it, into the quiet realm below. There is no struggle, only a peaceful surrender, a letting go into the deep blue. Feel the water yield around you, cool and silky against your skin, a gentle pressure that holds you safe. Imagine now that you are becoming part of the water itself, a tiny mote of consciousness carried within the slow, immense rivers that flow unseen through the world's oceans. These are the surface currents, warmed by the distant sun, broad and unhurried. Feel yourself caught in a vast, slow swirl, a current wider than any river on land, moving with a steadiness that speaks of immense, quiet power. You drift across the surface of this inner ocean, part of a great, sun-kissed gyre. Perhaps you feel a subtle warmth, the stored energy of daylight hours being transported gently across the globe. There is no destination, only the journey, the endless, looping path across the face of the deep. The movement is so vast, so slow, it feels almost like stillness, like the entire ocean breathing in unison. See the colors change around you, from the bright turquoise and sapphire of the sunlit shallows to the deepening indigo as you drift further from the light. Let the gentle pull guide you deeper now. Leave the sunlit surface world far behind. The light fades slowly, beautifully, shifting through shades of blue you've never seen until only the faintest, deepest azure remains. And then, even that dissolves into a soft, encompassing darkness. This is not an empty dark, but a rich, velvety blackness, filled with the silent presence of the deep ocean. The pressure increases gently, a comforting weight, like being held securely. The sounds of the surface world are gone, replaced by a profound silence, the quiet hum of the planet's deep workings. Here, time itself seems to slow down. Minutes, hours, days, they lose their meaning in the patient, enduring realm of the deep currents. Imagine the water around you growing colder, denser. This is water that carries the memory of polar skies, water that has released its warmth to the air in far-off icy regions. Feel its weight, its readiness to sink. And now, join it in its slow descent. Picture a waterfall in reverse, not crashing down, but sinking with incredible slowness and grace. A vast curtain of cold, heavy water descending towards the ocean floor. It slips beneath the warmer layers, beginning a journey that will last for centuries. You are part of this deep water formation, the beginning of the great ocean conveyor belt, the silent engine starting its cycle. There is no rush, only a steady, inevitable, yielding to gravity and density. Now you are traveling along the bottom of the world. The darkness is absolute, untouched by sunlight for millennia. The pressure is immense, a testament to the colossal weight of the water column miles above. Yet, within this deep, dark, high-pressure world, there is still movement. Feel yourself part of a vast, slow-moving river flowing through underwater valleys and across abyssal plains. This deep current is invisible, silent, yet it carries more water than all the rivers on land combined. It creeps along the ocean floor, a dense, cold stream carving its path through the darkness. Imagine the unseen landscapes it traverses, vast plains of fine sediment, towering underwater mountain ranges whose peaks never break the surface, deep trenches plunging into unimaginable depths. You are carried by this ancient water that hasn't seen the sun for perhaps 1,000 years. It moves with a patience that dwarfs human lifespans. Feel the profound slowness, the steadiness of this deep current. It is the heartbeat of the planet, slowed down, deep and resonant. It flows from one ocean basin to another, beneath layers of warmer water, connecting distant parts of the globe in a hidden network. Imagine this silent, invisible stream moving beneath the bustling surface world, beneath ships and storms, beneath the notice of almost everything, yet fundamentally shaping the world above. It carries oxygen from the surface to nourish the deep sea, and it transports coldness, balancing the planet's heat. It is the quiet regulator, the unseen hand balancing the scales of climate. Feel the sense of immense distance traveled in this slow, deep journey. Across the Atlantic, around the southern tip of Africa, creeping into the vastness of the Indian Ocean, or perhaps continuing onward into the immensity of the Pacific. The journey is epic, spanning generations, yet it happens in utter silence, in complete darkness, driven by the subtle differences in temperature and saltiness. There is a profound peace in this deep realm, a sense of being utterly removed from the hurried pace of the world above. You are suspended in timelessness, part of an ancient, enduring cycle. But the journey does not end in the abyss. After centuries spent crawling along the ocean floor, the water begins its slow return journey. Feel the current begin to subtly shift, to rise. It's not a sudden ascent, but a gradual, almost imperceptible lifting away from the seabed. This is upwelling, the slow rising of deep, ancient water towards the light. Imagine this water, carrying nutrients gathered over its long, dark journey, slowly spiraling upwards, mixing with the waters above. Feel the temperature begin to change, almost imperceptibly at first, then gradually warming as you rise through the water column. The darkness begins to soften. Faint glimmers of light penetrate from the distant surface. First, a deep, deep violet, then shades of blue returning, growing brighter, clearer. The pressure lessens, the feeling of immense weight lifting gently. You are rising towards the sunlit world once more, completing the great circle. Feel the water mingling, sharing its ancient coolness and its deep-sea nourishment with the upper layers. It rejoins the surface currents, ready to be warmed by the sun, ready perhaps to travel to the poles and begin the long, slow journey all over again. This entire cycle, this vast global circulation, is happening right now as you rest. While you sleep, these immense, silent rivers are flowing. Cold water is sinking in the polar regions, beginning its centuries-long trek along the ocean floor. Ancient water is slowly rising in distant seas, bringing life-giving nutrients towards the surface. Warm currents are sweeping across the surface, carrying heat from the equator towards the poles. The great engine is working, silently, powerfully, tirelessly. It is the Earth's deep, quiet breath, the steady circulation that helps maintain the world we know. Feel the rhythm of this silent engine within your own being. Your breath, rising and falling, mimics the upwelling and sinking of the waters. Your own circulation, carrying warmth and life throughout your body, echoes the ocean currents distributing heat around the globe. You are connected to these vast, slow rhythms. As you drift deeper into sleep, let your consciousness merge with this endless flow. Feel yourself cradled within the deep blue, carried by the gentle, inexorable currents. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go. Simply allow yourself to be moved, to be held within this immense, peaceful cycle. The ocean's heart beats slowly, deeply, reliably through the night. Let the thought of this vast, silent power soothe you. Let the image of the endless, quiet circulation lull your mind. Feel the coolness of the deep water, the darkness, the immense peace. Feel the gentle, steady movement carrying you towards sleep. The currents flow on, unseen, unheard, a constant presence, a silent guardian balancing the world while you rest. Drift now, on these imaginary currents, deeper and deeper into peaceful, restorative sleep. The silent engine works on, through the quiet hours, circling the globe endlessly, peacefully, while you dream. Let go and drift. And so, as the world outside settles into its own quiet rhythm, let your thoughts drift back to the vast, deep ocean we explored together. Picture it not just as a wide expanse of blue, but as a living, breathing system, filled with hidden rivers flowing silently beneath the waves. These are the ocean currents, the Earth's patient, powerful climate engine, working tirelessly, unseen, unheard, yet shaping the very air we breathe and the warmth we feel upon our skin. They are the slow, steady heartbeat of our planet's climate, a pulse measured not in seconds, but in seasons, years, centuries. Imagine the sheer scale of it, this global conveyor belt of water. Warmer waters, lighter and buoyant like a sun-warmed balloon, travel near the surface from the sun-drenched equator towards the cooler poles. Along the way, they release their stored heat like a gentle sigh warming the air above, softening the winters of lands that might otherwise be locked in ice. Think of it as a delivery service run by the planet itself, carrying parcels of warmth across thousands of miles, ensuring that no single place gets too hot or too cold for too long. This warmth rises into the atmosphere, mingling with the winds, influencing weather patterns far, far inland, a subtle touch from an ocean perhaps thousands of miles away. It's a quiet influence, rarely noticed directly, unlike a gust of wind or a sudden rain shower, but profoundly important. Then, as this surface water reaches the colder regions near the poles, it begins to change. Giving up its warmth to the chilly air, it becomes cooler, denser. And sometimes, particularly in the North Atlantic and near Antarctica, something remarkable happens. As sea ice forms, it leaves behind the salt in the water, making the remaining liquid even saltier and therefore heavier still. This cold, salty, dense water does something seemingly simple, yet globally significant. It sinks. It slowly descends, down, down, down into the abyssal depths, beginning a long, slow journey back towards the equator far below the surface. This sinking is the driving force, the engine part of our silent climate engine, pulling the surface waters along behind it, keeping the whole vast circulation moving. Think of this deep, cold current as the ocean's quiet return path. It creeps along the ocean floor, a vast, invisible river, carrying the memory of polar chill through the dark, high-pressure world of the deep sea. It travels for centuries, sometimes even 1,000 years, before gradually warming and rising back towards the surface, often in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, ready to begin the journey all over again. It's a cycle of immense patience, a testament to the planet's long-term rhythms. While we live out our days, seasons change, storms pass. This deep current continues its unhurried pilgrimage, a constant, stabilizing presence. This whole process, this thermohaline circulation, driven by temperature, thermo, and saltiness, haline, is the Earth's great equalizer. It prevents the tropics from overheating and the poles from freezing solid. It connects distant ecosystems, carrying nutrients stirred up from the deep sea back towards the sunlit surface waters where tiny plankton, the base of the marine food web, can thrive. These currents are threads weaving the planet's oceans into a single, interconnected system. A change in one part of the ocean, a slight shift in temperature or salinity, can eventually send ripples of consequence across the globe, carried along these slow, deep pathways. It's a silent engine because most of its work happens far from our view, deep beneath the waves or subtly within the water's properties. We don't hear the churning of gears or the roar of furnaces. Instead, we experience its effects indirectly. The surprisingly mild climate of coastal Europe compared to inland areas at the same latitude, the predictable patterns of rainfall that farmers rely on, the very stability of the global climate system that allows life to flourish in such diversity. The currents work without fanfare, their immense power masked by their slow speed and hidden depths. They are the quiet guardians of our planet's equilibrium. As you lie here, feeling the gentle weight of your blanket, perhaps you can imagine the gentle, persistent push of these currents. Feel the slow drift, the steady movement. The Earth, too, is settling down for its own kind of rest in the darkness, but its deep ocean heart continues to beat. The currents flow on, through the night, through the seasons, a constant, reassuring presence. They remind us that some of the most powerful forces are also the quietest, the most patient. They teach us about connection, how the distant poles are linked to the warm equator, how the deep, dark abyss is connected to the sunlit surface, how the ocean and the atmosphere dance together in a slow, intricate ballet that shapes our world. Let the thought of that slow, deep, quiet movement soothe you. Imagine the water flowing steadily, peacefully, in the vast darkness of the ocean depths. It carries no rush, no urgency, only the calm certainty of its long journey. It is a rhythm of planetary scale, a deep, underlying current of stability beneath the sometimes turbulent surface of everyday life. Allow your own breath to find a slow, steady rhythm, like the rise and fall of the tides, or the centuries-long journey of that deep ocean water. Feel yourself sinking gently into relaxation, letting go of the day, drifting on the quiet currents of approaching sleep. The silent engine of the ocean will continue its work, balancing the Earth's climate. While you rest and restore yourself, ready for a new day, subtly warmed and cooled by the tireless, unseen rivers of the sea. Sleep now, drifting peacefully on those calm, deep currents of the night. And so, our journey through the world's hidden rivers draws to a close for tonight. We've traveled immense distances, not with sails or engines, but carried along by the quiet, persistent flow of the ocean currents. We dipped into the cold, dark abyss where water begins its slow return journey, and we basked in the sun-warmed surface waters carrying heat towards the poles. We imagined the sheer volume of water on the move, a constant, planet-spanning circulation that dwarfs any river on land, yet operates with such deep underwater silence. It truly is Earth's silent climate engine, working tirelessly, diligently, without fanfare, shaping the world we know in ways we rarely pause to consider. Think of it now, as you lie still and warm. Even as you rest, that great engine continues its work. Far out in the vast darkness of the Atlantic, the Gulf Stream, like a warm breath, is flowing northward, carrying the memory of tropical heat towards cooler shores, softening the air of distant lands. Deep beneath the surface, perhaps thousands of feet below the waves we imagine, colder, denser water is creeping southward, a slow-motion cascade, returning towards the equator to eventually rise and warm again. It's a cycle measured not in hours or days, but in centuries, even millennia, for a single drop of water to complete its grand tour. A timescale so vast it's almost impossible to grasp, yet it underpins the rhythm of our seasons, the patterns of our weather, the very habitability of our planet. These currents are the planet's gentle regulators, the unseen hand balancing temperatures across the globe. They act like a planetary circulatory system, preventing the tropics from becoming unbearably hot and the polar regions from freezing entirely solid. They distribute not just heat, but also nutrients, carrying the building blocks of life from the depths to the sunlit zones where tiny plankton bloom, forming the base of vast marine food webs. They connect ecosystems, carrying seeds of seagrass or mangrove propagules across basins, linking shores that seem impossibly far apart. Whales follow these invisible pathways on their long migrations, and tiny fish larvae drift upon them to find new homes. It's a world interconnected by water, constantly moving, constantly exchanging, a testament to the intricate, interwoven nature of our Earth. Feel the stillness around you, the quiet of the room. Contrast that with the ceaseless, slow-motion dance happening in the deep. It's a comforting thought, perhaps, that this immense, powerful system operates so peacefully, so unobtrusively. It doesn't roar or demand attention. It simply flows. Its power lies in its persistence, its sheer scale, its quiet determination. Like the steady beat of a sleeping heart, or the slow, deep rhythm of your own breathing as you begin to drift towards sleep, the ocean currents maintain their ancient, vital rhythm. They are a constant presence, a fundamental process that has shaped our world for eons and continues to do so moment by moment, breath by breath. There is still so much we are learning about these hidden rivers. The deepest parts of the ocean remain less explored than the surface of the moon. We map the currents with satellites and drifting buoys. We probe the depths with robotic submarines, yet mysteries remain. How exactly do deep currents navigate underwater mountain ranges? How do subtle changes in salinity and temperature ripple through the entire system? It's a reminder that our planet still holds vast secrets, wonders hidden beneath the waves, and that's perfectly all right. It's good to know there is mystery left, something vast and profound that operates according to its own deep logic, largely indifferent to our own busy lives. Let the thought of that slow, deep, global circulation be a soothing one. Imagine the water molecules, countless trillions of them, moving together in these broad, invisible streams. Some are near the surface, sparkling in the moonlight somewhere far away. Others are in the crushing pressure and absolute darkness of the abyss, embarked on a journey that will last longer than any human lifetime. They drift past underwater landscapes, through canyons deeper than any on land, flowing with a patience we can only marvel at. There's a profound peace in that immense, slow movement. It's the earth breathing in its own way, regulating itself, maintaining a balance that allows life, including our own, to flourish. As you settle deeper into comfort, let your mind drift like a tiny particle carried on a gentle current. Let go of the day's thoughts and allow yourself to be carried towards sleep. Feel the gentle support beneath you, like the water cradling everything that floats upon it. The great ocean engine continues its silent work, turning and flowing, distributing warmth, sustaining life, all while the world above sleeps. It asks nothing of us but performs its vital task regardless. It is the quiet heartbeat of the planet's climate, a steady, reassuring presence in the background of our world. Let the knowledge of its vast, slow, peaceful rhythm lull you into a deep and restful sleep, carried on the gentle currents of the night. Sleep well, and so, as the world outside grows quiet and the stars begin their slow wheel across the velvet sky, we leave the great ocean currents to their ceaseless, silent work. We've journeyed tonight across vast expanses of blue, glimpsing the hidden rivers within the sea, the planet's own gentle circulatory system. These currents, unseen by most, unheard beneath the waves, are like the quiet breathing of the earth itself, a steady rhythm that shapes the world we know. Imagine the sheer scale of it all. Oceans covering most of our planet, linked together by these slow, powerful flows, a single interconnected body of water constantly in motion, carrying warmth, coolness, and the very essence of life, from shore to distant shore, from the sunlit surface to the mysterious deep. They are the Earth's silent climate engine, working tirelessly, day and night, season after season, millennium after millennium, maintaining a balance we often take for granted. They are the quiet architects of coastal climates, the unseen hand guiding marine migrations, the deep pulse regulating planetary temperature. Unlike the bluster of the wind or the sudden downpour of rain, the ocean currents move with a patience that spans lifetimes. Surface currents, nudged along by the persistent breath of the winds, paint swirling patterns on the sea's skin, carrying warmth from the equator towards the cooler poles, like gentle messengers delivering comfort across thousands of miles. Think of the Gulf Stream, that river of warm water flowing across the Atlantic, bathing Western Europe in a milder climate than its latitude might otherwise suggest. Deeper down, in the cold, dark abyss, another kind of current stirs, driven not by the wind above, but by subtle differences in the water itself, its saltiness, its temperature. Cold, salty water, heavy and dense, sinks slowly, particularly in the frigid polar regions, embarking on journeys that can take centuries, creeping along the ocean floor like sleepy giants, a hidden engine driving a global conveyor belt of staggering proportions. It's a dance of physics, a quiet ballet of density and gravity, played out on a planetary scale, a slow, deep rhythm beneath the more changeable surface waves and weather patterns. This profound slowness is part of their power, allowing them to store and transport immense quantities of heat energy, far more than the atmosphere can hold. Think of that great conveyor belt, the thermohaline circulation, as the planet's ultimate connector. It links all the major oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, the Southern, the Arctic, into one vast, slowly churning system. It is a slow but mighty loop that moderates our climate in ways we are only beginning to fully appreciate. Warm surface waters travel poleward, releasing heat into the atmosphere as they go, warming lands that would otherwise be much colder, making them habitable. As this water journeys towards the poles, it cools, and in some areas, evaporation increases its saltiness, or the formation of sea ice leaves the remaining water saltier still. This colder, saltier water becomes denser, heavier, and eventually, it sinks, plunging thousands of meters into the deep ocean. From there, it begins its long, slow return journey through the deep ocean basins, flowing like immense, invisible rivers along the contours of the seafloor. Along the way, it carries oxygen absorbed at the surface down to the depths, vital for sustaining the unique life forms that dwell in the abyss. Eventually, after perhaps 1,000 years, this deep water gradually rises again, often in areas called upwelling zones, bringing nutrient-rich waters up from the abyss to fertilize the sunlit surface zones. These nutrients, accumulated from the slow rain of organic matter from above, fuel explosive blooms of phytoplankton, the base of marine food webs, supporting vibrant fisheries and ecosystems. It's a silent, tireless redistribution service, ensuring that heat, oxygen, and nutrients don't just stay in one place, but are shared across the globe, maintaining a delicate, life-sustaining balance. Perhaps you've felt the subtle influence of these currents yourself, without even realizing it. A surprisingly mild winter breeze on a coast far from the tropics, warmed by waters that began their journey thousands of miles away near the equator. The cool, moist fog that often blankets coastal areas like San Francisco, a sign of cold, nutrient-rich deep water rising near the shore, chilling the air above it. Even the journey of a tiny sea turtle hatchling, instinctively finding its way into a current like the Gulf Stream, carried passively for thousands of miles to safe feeding grounds before eventually navigating back towards its birthplace. Consider the migration routes of great whales, following ancient pathways etched by these ocean rivers, pathways that lead them to rich feeding areas created by upwelling currents or to warmer waters for breeding. Life, in its myriad forms, from the smallest plankton to the largest mammal, has adapted to and relies upon these predictable, yet powerful, flows. They are the unseen highways of the ocean, guiding travelers, delivering sustenance, mixing waters, and connecting disparate parts of the marine world into one vast, living tapestry. A testament to the intricate connections woven by these silent flows. Like all things in nature, these currents are not entirely static. They respond, in their slow, ponderous way, to the changes happening on our planet. The Earth's climate has always changed, and the currents have shifted in response over geological time. Today, as the world warms at an accelerated pace, as glaciers and ice sheets melt, pouring fresh water into the polar seas, as rainfall patterns shift, the delicate balance of temperature and salinity that drives the deep currents might be subtly altered. Melting fresh water, being less dense, could potentially slow the sinking process that drives the great conveyor belt in sensitive regions like the North Atlantic. Scientists watch closely, using satellites to measure sea surface height and temperature, deploying arrays of moored buoys and autonomous underwater floats that drift with the currents. Like patient listeners, trying to understand the ocean's quiet language, they gather data from the sunlit surface to the crushing pressures of the abyss, deciphering the ocean's response to our changing world. There is still so much we don't know about the deepest parts of the ocean and the full intricacies of these flows, their eddies, their variability, their long-term cycles. It remains a realm of profound mystery and wonder, a reminder of the vast, complex systems that operate silently beneath the surface of our awareness, systems that have shaped our planet for eons and continue to exert their powerful, quiet influence. But tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let your mind rest on the immense timescale of these currents. They have flowed in varying patterns for millions of years, long before human footsteps marked the land, long before the continents settled into their present shapes. They are part of the Earth's deep, enduring rhythm, a fundamental process woven into the fabric of our living planet. They will continue their slow dance long after we have woken tomorrow, carrying warmth, coolness, life, and mystery across the silent depths, responding gradually to the changing world above. Let the thought of that slow, steady, planet-spanning movement be a comfort, a reminder of the vast, natural processes unfolding all around us, even as we rest. Imagine the deep, dark blue of the abyssal ocean, the gentle, inexorable drift of water masses heavier than mountains, moving with imperceptible slowness. Picture the faint starlight reflecting on a calm sea surface, beneath which these unseen rivers flow, connecting pole to pole, basin to basin. Feel the gentle pull of sleep, as steady and quiet as the deepest ocean current drawing you down into rest. The Earth breathes through its oceans, its silent climate engine humming softly, and tonight you can breathe with it, letting go of the day, sinking into peaceful slumber, carried on the quiet tide of dreams. The silent engine continues its work, maintaining the world's intricate balance, while you find your own quiet balance in the peace of sleep. Rest now, drift peacefully. The ocean keeps its watch.